Welcome back. In the second new episode of the podcast, we revisit my 2020 conversation with Professor Lynda Collins through a new lens, one shaped by her recent book, How to Succeed and Stay Human in Law School. This time, we focus on mindfulness, not just as a buzzword, but as a real, learnable skill that can help you navigate stress, reconnect with your values, and avoid losing yourself in the pressures of law school. Whether it's noticing the signs of burnout, taking a night off, or cultivating habits that keep you grounded, this conversation invites us to reimagine what success can look like when we are mindful about our actions and thoughts. Let's revisit that conversation from 2020. Yeah, and it just sounds like, so important to be doing that kind of work of self-reflection and checking in with yourself regularly. I sometimes notice, come mid-November when there's a lot of assignments due and the snow is starting to fall, that maybe there's even some signs that I can spot of a bit of burnout. Do you
Yeah.
have any advice for students if they start to notice themselves when they do that self-check? They're
Yeah.
experiencing burnout. What should they do?
So the first thing I would do is look at my list. Whatever that list is, you've decided is the priority, because it's astounding how often we forget, myself included, even after doing all of this research. So often when I find I'm feeling raw and ragged, I'll realize, oh, you know what, the past 3 days I didn't meditate. And I'm a daily meditator, but there's a kind of trance we get into. So the first thing I would do when you realize you're not feeling good is take a look at that list. Have you been doing your gratitude list? Are you exercising? How's your eating? How's your caffeine? And how's your sleep? And have you reached out to the people that you love? Because often when we notice we're in trouble, in fact, we've let go of the basics. Now, if you find you're in a situation where you can't do those basics, and I've been through that myself. You can't sleep or you're having trouble eating. That's when reach out for help. Reach out for counseling. You're so anxious that when you sit to meditate, you can't. Then this is where it's good that nobody lives on their own planet. You weren't sent to a law school of one student. You're in a community and we're here for you. But sometimes it's actually as simple as taking a night off. Like, I've been surprised at how many times people have said to me, like, that one yoga session or that one movie or that one going out dancing, my whole week pivoted on that. Or like a good long hug with your dog or your significant other can really change things. And, sometimes you also need to have a little bit of a schedule, like put your well-being into your schedule. I have my students, when they do their writer's note, we have our students, when they write their memo sometimes, evaluate how the writing process went. So like, what types of errors did you eliminate? What would you do differently? And I added a wellness question. How did you take care of yourself while you did this assignment? And what would you do differently? And sometimes, especially for those of you that are highly scheduled, put it on the schedule. Write down your meditation, get up in time to do it, write down a bedtime, when are you going to work out, etc. You can combine things. So maybe you're a awesome multitasker, go for a walk with your smart colleague, you're increasing friendship, you're getting exercise, you can talk about the test. I don't really understand this duty of care concept. What do you think? And you're doing all those three things at once. Like, there are creative solutions, which is not to say it's never going to be difficult. And when it is difficult, I just would invite you to not make that wrong. Nobody climbs Mount Everest because it's going to be easy. And it's the same with law school. If you can see it as part of the ride, it becomes a lot easier. You're not doing anything wrong if you're struggling. See if it can flip a little bit to become exhilarating. Exhilaration and excitement is on the other side of fear and anxiety typically, as any musician will tell you. And sometimes we're on one side, sometimes we're on the other. But sometimes just that shift in perspective can do it. But definitely reach out for whatever help you need. Some of us really thrive in structure. We have an Institute for Contemplative Studies at University of Ottawa. It runs a free mindfulness meditation every week in English and French. Maybe that's the commitment that you make to yourself. You're always going to be there. For some people, it's attending a place of worship on a regular basis. For some people, it's meeting with a counselor on a regular basis. Some groups of friends will say, like, look, Tuesday, lunch together, sacrosanct. We don't do anything else, except lunch together on Tuesday or whatever. And then some people don't need that structure. And you probably know, better than anybody what you need. But build it in, plan for it. Because for most of us, it won't just happen. I know a few people that if they just get up in the morning and do what comes naturally, their mental health is fantastic. I live with a person like that. I'm not that person. If I don't attend to my mental health, things are going to get ugly. So I've learned that it needs to be planned and integrated into my schedule and my list of priorities.
Yeah. And I suppose, a student that might be listening to this podcast is saying, oh, like that, I'll do that later, right? Like first year is so busy. I've got a memo due in Professor Kirkup's class, and I've got an exam coming up in Professor Mathen's class. Maybe I'll do that in the future because there will be some moment down the road where I get to the land of milk and honey and I have more hours in the day to go to the gym and meditate and sleep and have groceries in my house. So do you have any thoughts on that?
I have lots of thought, just try to stop me. I actually find is that people are way more efficient when they're taking care of their well-being physically and mentally. And I mean, I think we all know this a little bit. Everybody has had the experience of reading the same sentence 100 times and not absorbing it, right? But what the research are finding that if you've slept enough, if you're maintaining a positive outlook, in fact, you're going to do these assignments much more quickly than you otherwise would. You can read that case maybe once or once plus a second skim and actually absorb it. And think about this. How many times have you been in a class where you have the opportunity to learn from a really brilliant person who's made their life's work to study this field? And, you're kind of absent. You're kind of checked out because you're so exhausted or you're distracted. And so then you have to go home and self-teach, essentially, or you have to go into office hours, and it's really a massive waste of time. So actually cultivating your instrument, which is your brain and your body, ultimately frees up a ton of time. I mean, the other really obvious one is that when our students allow stress to get really out of control and physical health to get out of control, typically there's some kind of breakdown, and maybe it's something as minor as just a bad cold or something as significant as, very serious episode of anxiety or whatever. But in those cases, in fact, you lose days or in fact longer. Now, if that happens to you, none of this is a disaster. The law school is so resourced to support you. We have, as you know, our own counselor now in the Faculty of Law, but there's also a whole wellness department in the university. There's obviously the gyms that are highly subsidized. And, there's a lot of resources, and we are set up to accommodate our students. We're a school that is prepared to teach humans, not robots. One of the happiest lawyers I know, in fact, took a year off to deal with his mental health in law school, came back stronger, and now is doing really well 8 years into private practice, and in fact comes in and lectures to my class. So please don't feel that you need to be perfect in anything, including your wellness practices. You could get up one morning and be like, I am a hot mess. That's fine. You just get back on the bike. There's a Zen saying, fall down 7 times, get up 8.
Thanks so much for joining us for this brand new episode of Balladroit and my conversation with Professor Lynda Collins, author of the new book, How to Succeed and Stay Human in Law School. In next week's episode, the final one of the season, we continue our conversation with Professor Collins. Here, we focus on well-being and mental health as central to your success and sustainability in law school and the legal profession. We hope you'll tune in then.